Caspian Sea. But since that is saltwater, we don't count that. We shun the Caspian Sea. On a day like yesterday, where it's nice and clear and sunny and not very windy, if you go to the highest section of the hill behind us, you'd be able to see about 35 miles across the lake to the horizon. About 1% of the entire lake surface. On a day like today, on top of the Vista Star, we can see probably about 10 miles or so. The average depth of this lake is 493 feet deep, but the maximum depth is far deeper than that, sitting at 1,332 feet below the surface.
Give me that microphone.
To give you an idea of just how deep that is, if you took the Empire State Building from New York and sunk into the deepest part of the lake and stand on top of the building, you would be still 8 stories underneath the surface of the water. Enough to fit 2 Vista Stars on top of it. This lake is also the world's 3rd largest freshwater lake by water volume. Only 2 other lakes have more water than Lake Superior, Lake Tanganyika in Africa and Lake Baikal in Russia. Despite that, this lake is so large that it has a retention period of 200 years, or about 200 years, which means it takes that long for water that flows into it to flow out of it. This lake has about 3 quadrillion gallons of water. Yes, that is a real number. That is quadrillions follow trillions. If you were to write that number down on a piece of paper, get an idea of how big of a number that is the number 3, followed by Quadrillion. Okay, I'm glad someone laughed at that. That's probably the dumbest joke I have. I got plenty more though, don't worry. We got one. Oh, another hour and a half. All right, sounds good. No, 3 quadrillion, number 3, followed by 15 zeros. That is enough water to cover the entirety of both the continents of North and South America in a foot of water. That is also enough water to give every single person on the planet half of an Olympic-sized swimming pool. Although if that were to happen, I would definitely recommend you let the water warm up a bit before you went swimming. This lake is very cold. The average surface temperature throughout the year is about 40 degrees Fahrenheit. Even in the middle of August, it really doesn't get much warmer than that, except along the shorelines and in much shallower regions of the lake. But for the most part, it's around that 40 degrees. Kind of give you another visual idea of how much water this lake holds. Take the other 4 Great Lakes, add another 3 Lake Eries, and that's how much water is in Lake Superior. All around Lake Superior kind of sits in a bowl of land. Formed during the ice ages between 20 and 6,000 years ago, this lake used to be 700 feet higher than it is today. There would have been maybe 100 feet of land at the top of the hill still exposed. From 6,000 to about 4,000 or 3,000 years ago, the lake slowly started receding as the ice caps melted and then refroze further up north and down south in Antarctica and the Arctic Circle, exposing the rock that we have today and what is forming and forms the North Shore. The surface of Lake Superior sits at about 600 feet above sea level, and then it slowly starts dropping as you go through Lake Huron, Erie, and Ontario until it reaches the St. Lawrence Seaway about 2,300 miles away as the ship sails. Despite the kind of the cloudy overcast and a little bit of a rocky ride, it's still a decent day for boating for Lake Superior. Would you agree? I'm glad a few of you did. I mean, if you didn't agree, I suppose you wouldn't be here. But here you are. Despite it's kind of more of a dreary day, it's still a very calm day for this lake. During November, we can have the exact opposite conditions. November is the worst time of the year for Lake Superior for shipping and just general boating and swimming activities. During that month, we can have storms that cause winds to exceed speeds of a Category 2 hurricane, which is over 110 miles an hour. Those can obviously generate very large waves. The average height of waves during most storms are anywhere between 20 and 35 feet high, but they can get bigger than that on occasion. The largest wave that has ever been recorded on this lake was back in 1972, an 840-foot long freighter called the Roger Blau, estimated at one wave that they encountered to be over 43 feet high. To kind of give you a rough estimate, that is, I believe, about 20 feet above the top deck of this vessel. If you see any wave like that coming, let me know immediately. I say that like I'm going to be able to do anything about it. I'm not. I'm just going to be able to tell you all the brakes for impact. Those storms in November can obviously make this lake very dangerous. In fact, it is the largest, coldest, cleanest, deepest, and most dangerous out of the 5 for shipping. Across Lake Superior, there are over 350 known shipwrecks, with an estimated 1,000 more that we haven't yet discovered. The most famous shipwreck on Lake Superior is a vessel I'm sure at least a few of you guys know the name of, the Edmund Fitzgerald. Raise your hand if you guys know of that freighter. A few of you? How many of you guys know the song, The Wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald by Gordon Lightfoot? You folks want to sing it for us? No? You sure?
Yep.
All right. How about you, Sean? Do you want it? Do you know all the words? No? Well, then why'd you say yes? Sean? It's taking first years.
Hey, you.
No, I'm kidding. We like Sean. The Edmund Fitzgerald was a 740-foot long bulk-carrying freighter that departed Superior, Wisconsin on November 9th of 1975. About halfway across the lake, she encountered a very powerful storm that was producing 80-mile-an-hour winds and roughly 20 to 25-foot high waves on average, with rogue waves getting up into the 30 to 35-foot range. At about 7:15 p.m. on November 10th of 1975, the Fitzgerald suddenly disappeared below the waves, about 15 miles off the coast of Whitefish Bay, taking all 29 crew members down with her, unfortunately. The vessel currently lies about 530 feet below the surface of the water in 2 separate pieces. The stern section is upside down, about 180 feet away from the bow. We're not entirely sure what caused the Fitzgerald to sink. There could be a number of factors. Obviously, the storm would have been the main factor of it. But how and what made the storm cause the sinking of the Fitzgerald is going to remain a general mystery for the rest of time. The most common theory is that it encountered several rogue waves moving stern to bow, or back to front, in the direction that the ship was moving. This caused the stern to go down, pulling the bow down with it, and when the wave reached the bow, it kept its submersion enough that the ship just kept going down. This theory is supported by the report of the captain of the Arthur M. Anderson. Those of you might recognize that name. That is the most famous ship in association with the Fitzgerald. The Anderson was the last freighter to come into contact with the Fitzgerald and was about 10 miles away at the time of the Fitzgerald sinking. The captain of the Anderson reports that shortly before the Fitzgerald sank, the Anderson encountered 3 rogue waves moving stern to bow towards the Fitzgerald. He said, I believe his wording was, "We heard a very mighty crash and the ship lurched forward. We looked behind us and saw the entire stern submerged underwater with a wave moving along the length of the ship. This happened 3 separate times, one after the other. That phenomenon is known as the Three Sisters rogue wave effect on Lake Superior." The Anderson is actually on her way towards this harbor right now. She is still in service even after all these years. I believe she is scheduled to arrive sometime between 7:30 and 8 o'clock tonight. So if you guys are in the area, definitely come down to the Duluth Entry as we get one of our most famous freighters sailing in. I believe she is loaded with iron ore, with limestone. If she is empty, then she's probably coming in for iron ore. Speaking of shipping, we are the busiest port on Lake Superior and one of the busiest on the Great Lakes in total. We see hundreds of freighters every single year. I believe last year, despite the COVID pandemic, we still saw, I believe, somewhere around 640 ships. Not 640 individual ships. That's just the amount of times that a ship came in. About 10% of our shipping industry goes to what we refer to as salties, or saltwater vessels. Those are international shipments of usual machinery components, and then those freighters depart with grain to bring back to Europe and other locations. Most salties hail from the Marshall Islands, Europe, and Northern Africa. The remaining 90% of our shipping goes to lakers, or domestic shipping. Lakers are vessels that will pretty much spend their entire lives on the Great Lakes unless they get converted to saltwater status, or they might have started off as saltwater tankers. Lakers tend to be a little bit bigger than salties, usually averaging around 740 feet or so. Although some can get bigger, there are 13 freighters on the Great Lakes that exceed 1,000 feet in length, aptly named the 1,000 footers, the largest of those being the Paul R. Jagutha, who measures in at 1,013.5 feet long and 105 feet wide. She has a cargo capacity of 68,000 tons of iron ore, or 63,500 tons of coal. Unfortunately, today there are no ships in the harbor as of right now. Like I said, the first one arriving tonight will be the Anderson, and then we have several 1,000 footers arriving over the course of the next few days. Yes? If I knew about fishing. Right now they're fishing for smells on the piers. Otherwise, that's all I know. I can tell you what kind of fish are in here, sturgeon, bass, trout, salmon, stuff like that. That's about all I know.
Smallie or large?
I believe large. I could be wrong. I don't know. I'm not a fisherman.
Come on, man! You work for a cruise line.
I can tell you everything about the harbor and boats, but when it comes to fish, that ain't me. Now, in a couple of minutes, the aerial lift bridge will be going back up to allow us to re-enter the harbor. You can see we're kind of hanging out here just in front of the entryway. The bridge will rise every half hour at the tops and bottoms of the hours upon request, meaning the bridge would not go up unless our captain sent in a radio request saying, "Hey, this is the Vista Star. We'd like to have a lift at the top or bottom of the hour, depending on what time it is." Bridge will pretty much always respond with, "No problem, Cap. We'll go up in X amount of minutes, however far away we are." So we kind of have to wait for them to go up, which should be in the next minute or two or so. While we wait for the bridge to go up, I'll talk about these lighthouses that are in front of us. There are 3 lighthouses on the Duluth entryway, one at the end of each pier, North Pier Lighthouse on the right, South Pier Lighthouse on the left. The 3rd lighthouse is also on the South Pier over by the bridge. That particular lighthouse is privately owned by a gentleman named Steve Sola. Steve Sola and his family also own the hotel right next to the bridge. The other 2 lighthouses are owned and operated by the United States Coast Guard. These lighthouses signal to freighters where the entryway is, how wide the entryway is, and in relation to where the bridge is, how far away they are. South Pier Lighthouse, as you can see, has a glowing steady green light. The North Pier Lighthouse has a flashing red light that we do not see during the daytime. What is the meaning of those colors? General rule of thumb is red right returning, meaning that red light always has to be on your right side if you are returning into a port or harbor or a specific direction. Green will always be on your left, and then vice versa when you are departing. It's just how they decided it back when lighting was starting to become a thing. Made it easier to kind of determine, all right, where are we in relation when they didn't have sonar and radar.
Okay, let's go.
Do they use that lighthouse, the personal lighthouse?
Yeah,
Is it used for something?
That one is operational. It's got a flashy white light that we see during foggy days and at night. And then it's not uncommon to see Steve and a couple of his buddies up there when a freight is coming in or out. And the aerial lift bridge is on the rise right now. As it's going up, you can watch how it is working. In either tower of the bridge moving down right now are large concrete blocks. Each block of concrete weighs 450 tons, and they perfectly counterbalance the 900-ton lifting span. It is so well balanced, the bridge is only using 2 125 horsepower engines to operate. One last fact about these lighthouses I forgot to quick mention. The Coast Guard operates the 2 end lighthouses. Their job is to keep them operational. During stormy weather, there's usually a Coast Guard member or 2 inside each one to make sure it's operational, to keep it clean if necessary. On days like today, lighthouses are generally empty, and the Coast Guard, I believe, has a once a month routine to go in there and tidy everything up, make sure everything's operating, things like that. In other words, they go in there once a month to do some light housekeeping. Back to the aerial lift bridge. With the balance and counterbalancing of the lifting span and the two blocks of concrete, it's even more so precise than you would think. Every time they repaint the bridge, including lifting span, they have to add more weight to those blocks of concrete to counterbalance that new paint. It's very, very precise. In the upper right-hand corner of the bridge, you can see that there's a little steady yellow light up there. That yellow light tells us that right now the current in the entryway is under about 1.5 miles in speed, or about 1.5 knots. If the light changes to red or green, the current has picked up to over 1.5 miles and is moving out into the lake if it's green and into the harbor if it's red. If either red or green light are blinking, then the current has picked up to over about 3 miles an hour. Not very often does it do that. That's only happened when we have a sage, which is essentially the same effect that you get if you fill up a bathtub and then had a wave move across the bathtub back and forth. That is known as a sage. When this lake gets a sage, usually it's after a very powerful storm, and that is when it starts blinking like that, but it's very uncommon. In the middle of the lifting span of the bridge, little house holds the bridge tenders. There are 2 bridge tenders on duty all day long. There is at least one in there 24 hours a day. Their job is to keep the bridge to move up and down for us and other freighters, things like that. They communicated with us as we communicated with them through radio contact. Their job is to also monitor the entryway and the harbor in case something's going on. They will assist the Coast Guard in spotting things if necessary. For a day like today, though, they're generally probably pretty bored. They actually have a big old lounge chair in there, and the guy just presses a button every half hour. Very laid back. Although when it's busy, it's a lot more fun. They will often tell you that their job has its ups and downs. As we go underneath the aerial lift bridge, those of you on the outside areas, if you are still outside, you may wish to cover your ears. Our captain is going to be sounding off our ship's horn. He's going to be doing 1 long blast followed by 2 short blasts, to which the bridge is actually going to reply in the same pattern. So what you just heard is referred to as the captain's salute. A master salute is 3 long blasts followed by 2 short blasts. Captain's salute is 1 long blast followed by 2 short blasts. The ship will always start it. The bridge will never start it.
Yeah, we should maybe.
It used to be a requirement as an audio signal to the bridge that we are now under you or we have just gone under you, so then the bridge can come back down and the bridge would acknowledge it. Nowadays, with radar and sonar being much better than they are, it's more of a courtesy kind of a greeting. Basically, our captain said, "Thanks for going up, allowing us to re-enter the harbor." The bridge responds by saying, "You're welcome. We didn't have a choice."
I gotta go get them drinks.
They actually do have a choice, by the way. They are not required to go for small boats like us. Yes, we are considered a small boat. Why are we considered small? Because they operate from the federal government, not the state government. We are the state operated, even though we also operate under the Coast Guard. And so they are required to go for the Coast Guard, fire department, and freighters. But for small boats like us, they do not have to. If they chose not to go up, yeah, we'd be stuck. They pretty much always go up because otherwise they're not doing anything else. But they don't have to. Couple quick last minute facts about the aerial lift bridge. It does lift toll free. There is no charge to go underneath it or over it in your car or walking. And that horn that the bridge has is the exact same type of horn as heard at the University of Minnesota Hockey Arena in the Twin Cities. Off to our right is the Great Lakes Aquarium, the blue, green, and red building. That was built in the year 2000. When it was constructed, it was North America's only complete freshwater aquarium. There were no saltwater exhibits in there. They have expanded since then. They now do have a saltwater exhibit. They also have several touch pools that they're kind of more well known for. They have horseshoe crab touch pool, jellyfish touch pool. Yes, you can touch jellyfish. And sturgeon fish, mainly. They got several different types of sturgeon, including white and lake sturgeon. I'd recommend checking the aquarium out. It's actually a really unique little place to kind of learn more about the biology or the fish of the Great Lakes. The colors of the aquarium are pretty unique too. You might have noticed there's red, blue, and green painted on the sides. Those are not there at random. There's actually a sort of significant meaning, kind of more symbolic thing. The green side represents the state parks of Minnesota. The blue side is obviously the Great Lakes, and the red side represents Minnesota's iron ore industry. The four-pillar Bandstand Pavilion of Bayfront Festival Park. Bayfront is known for three main events: 4th of July fireworks, August Blues Festival, and the Bentleyville Lights of December. Bentleyville is arguably the most popular event. It is free to go check out. It lasts for about a month in December. I'd recommend it. They string up over 3 million individual LED lights all around the perimeter, all inside the park. It's a super cool event. I would definitely recommend checking it out this winter if you have the time to. Next up is the Pier B Resort, standing next to Pier B Silos. The resort is the newest building in the harbor. It's exactly what it sounds like. It's a resort. It's a hotel. A little higher end, but they do have a restaurant on the first floor that is open to the public. They got some outdoor seating, a little marina that you can go into, and a little outdoor hot tub. The silos used to be storage silos for grain, but they are no longer in service. They are now empty. Coming into view behind the silos is the black and white vessel known as Sundew. USCG 404 Sundew. She was a former Coast Guard vessel built in 1940. She was an active Coast Guard ship for about 60 years, or a little over 60 years, until she was replaced in 2004 by the larger vessel Alder, which is the black and white ship to our left. I will talk more about the Alder as we come past her at the end of our cruise. That little salute that you just heard from our captain is a symbolic commemoration salute towards the old white pilot house to our right. That is the pilot house of the Irvin L. Clymer. The Clymer was an old steamship that was launched in 1936. She was scrapped in the 90s, and her pilot house has been sitting there since. Both the pilot house and the Sundew are now privately owned by a gentleman named Jeff Foster. If you like scenic views, go to the very top of the hill directly to our right. You can climb to the top of Enger Tower. You can actually see the top of the tower right now if you look close enough. Enger Tower, spelled E-N-G-E-R, is named after Bert Enger, who was a Norwegian immigrant who lived here in the city. He was a very wealthy man, very successful furniture businessman. He was a pretty cool dude. He owned that land up there. He actually let people go onto his property to get a good scenic view of the lake and the harbor. When he died, he gave that land and $50,000 to the city in his will. They used that money to build the 130-foot tall tower that's up there today. I would definitely recommend going up to Enger Tower if you've never been up there before and you really want to get a nice view of the lake. The top of that tower gives you that 35-mile wide view of the lake that I mentioned earlier. Beautiful place to watch sunrise, sunset, moonrise, ships coming, going, things like that. Obviously, I've been up there several times. Do not worry. You do not have to walk uphill to get there. There are roads that take you there. But I would recommend it. The views up there truly are superior. Unless it's, like a foggy day or kind of at night or something like that, then you might say the views are a little more eerie.
I'm done.
I'm not. I got plenty more. We're only halfway through the trip.
Who's got the seltzer? Mellow yellow. Pink lemonade.
All the kids get pink lemonades. I told her to tell boy the rest of the bitch face. She just kidding.
Yeah. No.
Slap him
He
for
did
me.
not. I can't assault the passenger.
Well, then can I, since he's my brother?
I can't see.
What did Sonny do?
Most of the rest of what we are going to be seeing on this cruise is going to be consisting of certain products that we send out. The first one is this terminal here to our right, the Riverland Agricultural Corporation's grain terminal, locally referred to as Duluth Stores. This is one of our largest and is one of North America's most efficient grain terminals. Grain comes in via train from the Dakotas and western Minnesota and is loaded in on the left side of this terminal. Over 5 miles of conveyor belts connect this entire facility together. The grain eventually makes its way to the right side of the terminal where the 2 grain conveyor loaders are. That is where ships will go to load up on grain. This terminal is so efficient it can load a freighter with 20,000 tons in 14 hours. Weather providing, of course, they will not load if it's raining or anything like that.
What flavor is that?
We have 6 active grain elevators in this harbor. We are going to be seeing about 3 of them, including this one. Grain is our third export, our third highest export in the harbor, the other 2 being iron ore and coal. A little further down, we're past that. Most of our grain is shipped internationally. There is one terminal in the harbor that still does domestic shipping for the most part. The General Mills terminal, which we'll pass later, ships mainly to one of their facilities in Buffalo, New York. This terminal pretty much always sends its grain over to Europe or Northern Africa. Most of the grain that we send now consists of red spring wheat and durum wheat, which are used to make breads and pastas.
You want 3 suckers?
So if you go to one of the Mediterranean countries, like Italy, for example, you go there, go to a restaurant, get like a pasta or some kind. Most likely the grain used to make that came from one of these terminals in this harbor. So you can go ahead and noodle on that.
There's no ships in here.
Sadly, no. At least none that are active. There's a couple freighters that I'll point out they have been active.
Alright, get a little bit.
And that's how it is sometimes.
Yeah.
Sometimes they're just not here. I have had people demand a refund because there weren't any ships. It's really funny to me.
Hey, what's that?
What's what?
That flat
That's a barge.
barge?
Yeah. What do you use it for? That one is mainly used for dredging purposes. Off to our right, you can see there's a couple of barges over there sitting next to a white and black tugboat. That tugboat is the Bulldog, built in the early 1900s. She is a workhorse tugboat now, often moving these barges around the harbor for dredging operation purposes. Dredging is when they are scooping material off the bottom of the harbor or the lake to deepen it and widen it. I hope you guys are following the rules of the water, because if you look in front of us to our left, you will see the Coast Guard going past us. That is their 80-foot long speedboat. It can get from one side of the harbor to the other in about 7 or 8 minutes, and it's completely watertight on the inside. It is also a self-righting vessel, meaning that thing is almost impossible to flip over. And if it does flip over, it keeps turning until it's right side up again. That cost $3 million to build. Directly to our right is Ascon Metals, a metal scrapyard that is in the process of breaking down one of our most well-known freighters. If you look directly to our right, you might want to grab some pictures of that old white vessel over there. That is the 450-foot long old J.B. Ford. The J.B. Ford is currently the oldest still floating vessel on the Great Lakes, launched in 1903, 9 years before the Titanic sank. She was an active cement carrier until the 90s, when she was retired and brought over to the Lafarge Cement Terminal in this harbor, where she worked as a storage vessel. In 2015, she was brought to Ascon, where she is now, to eventually be scrapped. They just started the scrapping process about 4 months ago. Very unfortunate. We are very sad to see her go. Luckily for us, though, they found concrete still in her holds, rather than cement. There were some leaks that caused some water to go in and mix into the cement and turn into concrete, so they have to hire a private contractor now to get that concrete out. So the Ford will last at least 1 more year. You can see where they have started the scrapping process on her stern. There used to be a lot more metal there and a smokestack. So definitely taking pictures of the Ford while we are here and you are able to see her. She will not be here much longer. Give you a little bit of a size idea. J.B. Ford is probably one of the smallest vessels still floating. She is about half the size of the biggest freighters out there today. Next up is the port terminal. Everything that we're going to be going past is collectively known as port terminal. This is the port terminal slipway. This is where freighters will go to unload turbine components for wind turbines, or they will dock there for maintenance or repair work if necessary. These storage buildings are part of the Clear Public Terminal. And this yellow tech crane here to our right, that marks the end of a pipeline that runs from the Husky Fuel Refinery plant in Superior, Wisconsin. So this is where ships go to refuel in this harbor. The Husky Fuel Terminal holds 560,000 gallons of fuel. It can load a freighter with anywhere between 50,000 to 80,000 gallons in just under 2 hours. Really nice and quick, very efficient. Freighters on the Great Lakes burn a lot of fuel. Most of them are burning anywhere between 25 to 40 gallons per mile moved. Now that might seem like really poor fuel efficiency if you're measuring your fuel usage by the mile rather than by the hour or whatever you want to do with cars. But you have to remember that these freighters are hundreds of feet long and can carry tens of thousands of tons of material at a time. The biggest of the freighters, the 1,000 footers, they can carry, depending on which 1,000 footer you're looking at, between 58 to 78,000 tons. That makes them 6 times more fuel efficient to cargo ratio than a train and 60 times more fuel efficient than semi-trucks. In part, that is why this harbor is one of the busiest harbors in the United States. And then everything else to our right is Project Cargo. Project Cargo is a generally land-based shipping company. They will very rarely deal with shipping. Every now and again, a freighter will dock alongside the blue cleats a little bit to our right in front of us, and will discharge a load of limestone. And freighters that unload turbine components, Project Cargo will put on a very long truck bed and will truck across the country, usually over to Montana or down to Oklahoma for wind energy purposes. Before y'all get mad at me, the United States does produce its own turbine components. Some of them are produced down in Louisiana and sail up the Mississippi River to the Twin Cities. Others we buy and trade from other countries. The ones that we buy and trade with from other countries end up here and are then trucked across the country.
Ian, go pick it up. Go pick it up.
Look at him. So.
I don't see it.
Look at your mom.
It's by the door. Ian,
Where is
Go
it?
pick up your trash, buddy.
Oh, I see it.
go get it.
I'll tell your mom. That's Pop. That's not yours. That's yours.
How many of you folks like tugboats? All right, I see 2 people telling the truth. 3 people telling the truth. The rest of y'all are liars, I can tell. Tugboats are awesome. Well, we are about to go past 3 tugboats. Right up here in front of us to our right, from nearest to farthest, are 3 tugboats: Missouri, Arkansas, and North Carolina. These are part of the Great Lakes Towing Company. Great Lakes Towing is the largest towing company on the Great Lakes, operating 35 tugboats in all, including 1 in Alaska and 1 in Hawaii. These are not dredging workhorse tugboats, these are ship pushing and pulling tugboats. These boats are responsible for moving international salties around the harbor. They will not assist laggers unless absolutely necessary. Laggers are designed to maneuver harbors and rivers on the Great Lakes without any assistance. Each of these tugboats is about the same length as the Vista Star and about the same height. There's actually 13 feet of hull underneath the water's surface that is hidden. That is used for leverage purposes and stability. They are also powerful enough to move a 650-foot freighter all by themselves. Each tugboat possesses a 1,250 horsepower engine. When these tugboats are not assisting freighters as they are now, they are docked here waiting for the next salty to come in. And in the fall and winter months, between December, January, March, and April, they are being used for ice breaking purposes. All 3 of those tugboats are over 100 years old. I believe the Arkansas was built in 1897. Next up on our right is CRH US Cement, one of 2 cement terminals in this harbor. This one is on the Duluth side of the harbor. CRH US receives about a dozen ships every single year. Those ships are loaded with about 20,000 tons of powdered cement loaded in Mississauga, Ontario. Powdered cement is difficult to get off of a ship. By the time the ship gets here, that cement has compacted down into one solid piece under its own weight. So they can't just scoop it out like they normally would. So CRH has this little contraption here on the end. This is essentially a massive jackhammer attached to a vacuum tube. This machine extends into the compartments of the ship, breaking down cement and sucking the cement into the silos behind it. It has a rate of 130 tons unloaded per hour. It takes about 60 hours to unload a freighter. Those silos have a 43,000 ton capacity, so it can hold 2 ships worth of cement at a time. So this terminal only receives about a dozen ships or so every year. Those silos are also the tallest structure in the Duluth Superior area, standing 284 feet high. Next up, we're going to be entering the St. Louis River section of our tour, marked pretty obviously by these 2 bridges. This first bridge to our right is the old Interstate Bridge. Built in the late 1800s, if I remember correctly, this was at one point the only land crossing between the cities of Duluth and Superior. The only other way to cross the river and this area was by a ferry. In the 1960s, if I remember correctly, I don't quite remember my date for that, this bridge actually collided with the freighter, or the freighter collided with it. The bridge tender operating the bridge fell asleep. And so it hit the bridge and knocked a whole section of the bridge into the water. So they said, you know what, we probably shouldn't use this bridge anymore. And they built the Blatnick Bridge that we're about to go underneath. John A. Blatnick Bridge is one of 2 bridges that now cross the harbor on the highways. This one is 8,400 feet long and has a clearance height of 128 feet, allowing all freighters to pass underneath it. Kind of a little bit of a cool fact about the John A. Blatnick Bridge, it is actually, I believe, going to be completely demolished and rebuilt sometime in this next decade. Reason why is because this is the exact same design as the I-35 bridge that collapsed in the Twin Cities in 2007. After the bridge collapsed in 2007, the authorities were incredibly worried about this bridge, and they have been inspecting it thoroughly every single year. Sometime in the next month and a half or so, we will start seeing inspectors on cherry pickers going underneath the bridge, making sure everything is still structurally sound. Obviously, it is structurally sound, otherwise it probably wouldn't be used right now. So one of y'all has been saying, oh, we're in Wisconsin now. Technically, you're right. You're also not completely right. We're actually in between the 2 states right now. Everything to our right is Duluth, Minnesota. Everything to our left is Superior, Wisconsin. The border between the 2 states runs right down this shipping lane that we are in right now, heading up the St. Louis River. Behind us, it veers off to the right and heads all the way down to the Superior entryway. So we are right on that border right now, and it's not a super horrible day. If you look over the side of the boat, you look close enough down to the water. Give anyone a second who might want to head over there so they can see what I'm about to point out. It doesn't matter what side of the boat you're on, you can be on the left or right side. If you look close enough, you might be able to see the white line that divides the states. Alright, it made a few of you look. Straight off to our left, on the other side of the Blatnick Bridge, you can see the old freighter Edward L. Ryerson. The Edward L. Ryerson is currently sitting in the Fraser Shipyard. She was built in 1956 and was an active bulk carrier for a number of years. She is in long-term layup right now. She has not been in service for, I believe, a decade now. At 750 feet long, she has several titles to her name. She is a series of last. She is the last freighter to be built for the United States from a certain terminal. I don't remember which one. She is the last non-self-unloading straight decker to be built for the Great Lakes. She is also nicknamed Fast Eddie. She is one of the fastest freighters on the Great Lakes. I believe her top speed is about 18 or 19 miles an hour. Keep in mind, top speeds of most other freighters are about 15 miles an hour. Directly to our right is the Interstate Island, also referred to as Bird Island for clear and obvious reasons. This was a man-made island in 1897. It was the connection point for a railway bridge. There were 2 drawbridges on either side of the island for the trains to cross, but also so ships could continue sailing. That railway lasted for about 100 years. In the late 1990s, they tore that down, rebuilt, and added a different bridge further upriver out of the way of the ships. The island has since become a state and national property. It is not open to the public. It is a bird sanctuary. You can see there are a lot of birds over there right now. It is their nesting season. Most of those birds are seagulls, but there are a bunch of common tern as well. Common tern are what make that island protected land. Common tern only use 2 islands on this lake to nest these days. They used to nest all along the shoreline, but the construction of the harbor destroyed their habitat. Most of those birds, like I said, though, are seagulls, mainly ringed seagulls and herring seagulls. About 2,500 individual pairs of birds are utilizing that island right now. They will stay there until early August when their hatchlings are old enough to fly. Kind of a fun fact about seagulls. The term seagull is not an actual name for the bird. Scientifically, they are referred to as gulls. Herring gull, ring gull, laughing gull, giant gull, whatever gull it is. People call them seagulls because we associate them with the oceans because they're found everywhere. In this area, I don't know why we call them seagulls. We shouldn't. We're not anywhere near an ocean. We should call them like lake gulls or something, right? Makes a little bit more sense. A better name, actually. Back behind us, over by the tugboats, that area on navigation charts is known as Superior Bay. Don't know why they named it that. That's what they named it when they were drawing up the navigational charts way back when. So instead of seagulls or lake gulls, we should maybe call them bagels. I hear they aren't quite as good though. A little chewier. This terminal to our left is the Superior Midwest Energy Terminal owned by Midwest Energy Resource Company. This is our coal terminal in this harbor. Built in 1976, if I remember correctly, it was built in 10 months. They are very eager to get this terminal operating. It is our only coal terminal in this region. Receives Western coal by train. About 14 trains arrive daily, each carrying about 12,000 tons of it. This terminal was built so quickly and is in such high esteem that it earned the Civil Engineering Award for that year. Civil Engineering Award is very prestigious. It is only given out once every single year. Past recipients include the Hoover Dam and the Golden Gate Bridge. At one point, this was the largest coal terminal in the world. It is no longer the largest, but it still sends out millions of tons every year. I believe 8 to 10 million tons every year, depending on markets, on the market for coal. I'll talk a little bit more about that terminal as we come back alongside it on our way back to our dock. So this section of the harbor that we're in, this is where most of the 1,000 footers go to when they load up here. Most of them either go to Superior Midwest to load up on coal, or they'll go to the CN docks up in front of us to load on iron. I'll talk more about the CN docks as we get closer. The 1,000 footers have to do some unique maneuvering. They cannot come in here going forward. They are too large to turn around in this section safely. So they actually stop right next to those tugboats that we passed, rotate about 270 degrees, and reverse their way back in here. They're equipped with what are called bow and stern thrusters. Those are propulsion systems in the front and back of the vessel that force water off to one side or the other. This increases their maneuverability greatly. Almost every laker is equipped with at least a bow thruster. Most are also equipped with stern thrusters. This is what allows them to maneuver harbors and rivers without tugboat assistance. And that is how 1,000 footers can move around this harbor without tugboats. The only time they ever require tugboats are if they run aground, which does happen occasionally, or if something happens with their engines. Most recent event was the 1,000 footer James R. Barker arriving through the Superior entryway. One of her 2 engines stopped working early on while she was crossing Lake Superior. So she was only going about half speed and requested a tugboat to kind of shadow her as she went to the port terminal dock for repair work. Directly to our left is Halide Dock number 8. It is a 200-acre piece of land that holds and receives certain materials. You can see those big tarps. Those are most of that is limestone and salt. Halide 8 also receives small shipments of liquid calcium chloride, which is used for de-icing purposes.
Give me a handful of that. Happy birthday.
Every year. Last year we had like 640. About 48 of those were salties, and then the rest were Lakers. There's only about 150 or so Lakers on the list, so it's a lot of arrivals. But yeah, we'll have several hundred every year. So far this year we have been 6 since March 23rd. The Sulaks close on January 23rd every winter. So they determine when the shipping and then they will be open at midnight on the 23rd of March. So shipping here will end usually around January 21st or 22nd and will start on March 21st. So it's regular wintering each year. So up in front of us are the CN Duluth Docks. These are the 2 iron ore docks on the Duluth side of the Twin Ports. These 2 are the largest structures of their type. Dock 5 is on our left, opened in 1914 and shut down in 1984. Dock 6 on the right, opened in 1919 and is the larger of the 2, making it the largest structure of its design in the world. Together with the approach trestle, Dock 6 is over a mile long. From shoreline to the end of the dock, it is 2,304 feet long and stands 85 feet high. It has the ability to load 3 freighters at once, 2 on the left side and 1 on the right side. However, due to economic demands right now, only the right side of the left side of the dock is active. So it can only load 2 ships at a time these days. The way the dock works is very simple. There are 4 railroad tracks on top of the dock, 2 for the left side, 2 for the right side. So only the 2 left side are active right now. Those underneath those railroads, it is completely open down to the triangular storage pockets. So trains unload their cars into those storage pockets. Each train car carries about 75 tons, and each storage pocket can carry about 3 or 4 loads, about 300 tons of material. This terminal used to ship out iron ore in its raw form, which when it was found was 60% iron. These days, we ship it out in the form of taconite, which is 30% iron, but is a much more difficult rock to deal with. So we send them out in the pellet form, about the same size as golf balls. These chutes alongside the end of the dock are called gravity chutes. Those triangular storage pockets funnel directly down to the base of these chutes. These chutes then lower into the storage of ships and can line up perfectly with each compartment opening of freighters. They utilize a process called gravity-free loading. It is very simple. A hatchway at the bottom of the storage pocket opens, and gravity does the rest of the work. It is very, very efficient. A full 300 tons of storage of material is sent into a ship in 40 seconds utilizing this method. All the ship will have to do is move forward or backward every now and again to realign with another set of chutes, or they just wait for the storage pockets to be reloaded. It takes about 6 to 8 hours to load a ship utilizing this method. The only problem with gravity-free loading is that it is very inefficient for larger freighters. In the 1970s specifically, ships were being built a lot bigger than they used to be. Between 71 and 81, 14 ships were built that were much wider than normal. These would include the 13 1,000-footers and the 840-foot long freighter Roger Blau. All 14 of those ships are 105 feet wide. Standard width of the other Lakers were about 75 feet wide or so. So to counteract this inefficiency, the section of the dock in front of us was stripped away of its gravity chutes in the late 1970s and were replaced with these 21 shuttle conveyor booms. These extend lower horizontally over the width of the ship, can completely cover a 105-foot wide freighter. A conveyor belt extends into them and slowly retracts over time as it loads material, very evenly and efficiently loading the freighter. That section of the dock set a record back in 1986. It loaded a 58,000 tons in 3 hours. This dock is large enough that it can even receive material. That white structure right in the middle of the gravity chutes is a limestone receiving hopper. It allows freighters to unload limestone in about 6 hours. Now these two docks saw their busiest days in World War II and the Korean War. During that time, all of the quality raw iron ore was used up. Afterwards, we had to use taconite. The busiest day these terminals ever saw was the day after the Normandy invasion in World War II. During that 24-hour period, these docks loaded 35 ships with 406,000 tons of ore. Dock 5 is no longer active. It shut down in '84 due to lowered economic demand. If we were to enter a very large-scale war again, most likely they would work quickly to refit this with chutes and put it into operations once again. On the other side of Dock 5 is CN Halide Dock number 5. Halide number 5 is another receiving dock similar to Halide number 8. You can see a lot of material over there right now, a lot of limestone, a lot of sand, a lot of gravel. There might be some mulch and fertilizer over there right now as well.
Scared for that.
See, I'm amazed. I remembered all